The prow cut through the clear water, shattering it like glass. Ripples cracked off in various directions, snaking away in circular patterns. The world was quiet bar a few gentle splashes as the man dipped his paddle in and out of the water, expertly propelling himself forwards. The action had become mechanical now. His arms switched from side to side on instinct, keeping the long vessel steady as it wove from narrow, fast-running streams to the great, vast and cumbersome rivers like the one he was now perched atop. The pale water marked the final leg of his journey. He smiled as the dappled rays of sun beat down on him. The weather had mellowed and was slowly encroaching into a hard-fought summer. The banks to either side of him had begun to come alive with birdsong, as more than just the hardiest creatures returned to the open and clung easily to the riches which the river provided. There was no wind. He could hear it whistling occasionally beyond the boundaries of the river, but it was unable to encroach any further. The vast trunks of the trees which lined the water's body had grown into towering arches over the water's surface, and knotted together above the river's centre, where the smaller branches and leaves wove into a viridian lattice canopy. This natural roof shielded the current from the wind's howling protest, but gratefully allowed the sunshine and rare pours of rain to gush down onto the crystal surface below. The man thought he would regret leaving. Regardless of the arduous and painful necessity of his journey, this final leg had been nothing but a blessing, and one he would not quickly forget. As he dangled a bare foot through the mirror surface, he noticed its wake, the same one he had seen across the stretches of his journey, distant at first, but always circling closer, never revealing the cause of the strange disturbance. He had only caught glimpses before, a sheen of bright silver scales protruding from the shallows of a stream near his home, a sleek shadow weaving under the ice of a nearby floe as he forged through the winter. It had never stayed for longer than a brief moment, nor seemed overly interested in the little craft it swam by, but always it had reappeared. As his canoe slid forwards across the water's shining surface, he watched the smooth wake of the thing disappear behind him. The man glanced down towards his feet where he eyed the long rifle which lay gently on a canvas sheet. He considered pulling it forwards to rest against him, but thought better of it. He was so close now to his destination that he decided to pay no mind to the thought of trouble. A wave rose quickly about 20 paces in front of his little craft. The man clutched the boat's sides as it wobbled over the crest of water and settled back to the river's shaking surface. The banks had gone silent. Without moving his canoe, the man leant forwards to stare at the patch where the wave had come from. A shadow snaked towards him. By the size of the frothing ripples careening into the river's sides, the thing must be at least 10 meters in length. He had heard tales of such creatures, but never in a river. He tensed as it sped towards him. Its body swam too deep for him to make out much more than an outline, but this was enough to fill him with dread, as his hand crept to the rifle beside him. He held his breath as it closed in, his fingers tightening around the metal, the shape growing larger. The man braced for impact as the thought of his beautiful little canoe being rammed by the vast creature crossed his mind, but the shadow simply passed beneath him, gone deeper into the waters at the river's centre. The man didn't turn to check for the creature's progress. The paddle now dipped and rose out of the water, accompanied by a noisy splashing where normally the man's progress could never be heard. The little craft sped through the water, its previously perfect balance upset into a rhythmic tossing as it fled over the ripples and waves in the river. He wasn't sure to what extent the creature was still following him. He caught glimpses, but only for a moment. A section of snaking torso or the powerful flick of a fin under the water. Paddling was the only thing which went through his mind. He wasn't sure how long he'd been travelling at this pace, or how much further he had to push himself, but by now his arms were burning, and the setting sun began to bathe the river in golden light. Slowly, 2 great stone pillars began to emerge from the vegetation on the river's edge. They grew as the man floated towards them, a grin beginning to spread across his weary face. They marked his destination. Around the bend up ahead, a small jetty would be waiting for him, from which he could make his way and land. The stroke of his paddle increased again, building up to a smooth rhythm which shot the little craft forwards. The pillars had solidified now to the point where he could make out the intricate markings engraved in their side. some made illegible by the thick growth of ivy which wound its way up their vast length. They couldn't be much more than a stone's throw from where the canoe sat in the water. As the man raised his head to admire the two huge stone trunks, his gaze was pulled away from the surface of the water, which had begun to ripple and swirl in front of him. The surface erupted. The man was sent flying backwards, being nearly lifted from his craft entirely as his grip on the paddle loosened, letting it slip into the rushing water below. The sides of his little ship bobbled dangerously as he was tipped side to side, disoriented by having been forced into a lying position. Water began to trickle over his matted hair. He reached up a blistered hand to shield his face as a thick trickle of rain began to cascade down upon him. He hadn't seen a cloud all day, but by now a thick stream of drops pelted him steadily, contributing to the small river which now wound its way down the length of the canoe's bottom. His eyes focused as the rain was joined by a dark shadow which bore down upon him. The man froze as he noticed the cause of the bizarre weather. The creature's head craned down at him at the end of a great sleek neck which protruded from the water's surface and towered meters into the air. It formed a proud, gleaming crescent before reaching down to hold on to its enormous serpentine head. Its underside had a soft, wormy colour. Every other available inch of fat neck held layers and layers of thick, shining silver scales, locked together and shimmering a burning bronze in the light of the setting sun. For a moment it simply stood there, its wide, glassy eyes fixed on the craft below it, where the terrified little man tried desperately to cringe away from its baleful watch. The man could focus on nothing but the bright teeth which jutted from the creature's mouth at various intervals, in a wide, stretching grin. They leered towards him as his fingers slowly stretched towards the long rifle at his side. He recoiled quickly as a rumbling hiss began to emit from the thing's mouth. The man shook fiercely as he leaned away from their queer tune. The two regarded one another as the man's hand closed around the rifle's barrel. Their eyes locked and the river quieted once more. The creature broke the silence. Before the man was able to even draw the rifle across his chest, the thing's mouth had stretched wide, revealing more fearsome teeth as it snaked down towards him. The man closed his eyes before the jaws could reach him. He heard only the rip and crunch of wood as the creature tore a rigid chunk from the side of his canoe. He opened his quivering eyes in time to see the glistening body slide over him and slip elegantly into the glowing surface of the water. The force of its dive sent him spinning towards the riverbank. The man didn't move for a while. He lay huddled in his boat, staring at the water through the newly made window until any hint of movement had stilled, and the river returned to glass. Only a slither of sun remained over the horizon as the man pulled his frame from the bed of the canoe. Now lacking a paddle, he gripped the barrel of his rifle and gently placed the butt into the darkening water. The surface started to crack once more as the remains of the canoe edged away from the bank and tentatively made its way between the huge stone pillars which bordered the river. A smile reached the corners of the man's mouth as the tip of a pier came into view as he rounded the corner. He tried to accelerate with his makeshift paddle, but only succeeded in making more noise. He didn't mind the splashes. As he and his canoe drifted slowly towards the shore, he somehow knew the creature would no longer follow him, its glistening body now absent from the shining water.